If you've been following my community tab posts, I've actually been doing little blogs on my favorite girl in each visual novel I've read. If you haven't, I'll be using this video to briefly talk about my favorite girls in just about every visual novel I've read and why. For this video, I'll only talk about visual novels where I'm fairly confident on who my favorite girl is. My best girl in Amairo Ionauts was Shirley. I was inspired to read it in Japanese since I saw a fan art of Shirley nosebleeding while drawing a doujin. She did not disappoint on that front, having constant daydreams of shipping her friends for some hilarious comic relief. My best girl in Aokana was Asuka. She was basically a well-done, typical moe blob, but with traits of a shonen protagonist like being innocent, but secretly a natural genius in physical prowess. Though I guess in this case, it's the fictional sport Flying Circus. Just a really fun character with a hype route. My best girl in Baldur's Sky was Nanoha. Admittedly, lots of it is because I'm kind of biased towards childhood friends, and she does have some kind of annoying flaws like being a crybaby, but she still does have a good, interesting role of the story, and some of the twists related to who she trusted hurt. My best girl in Bokuten was Naruko. As far as pure childhood friends go, she might be my #1 favorite. She has the cooking for main character everyday thing, but also has some fun stuff like going through his window and just generally having a more spunky but very nice and giving personality. Chihiro Himikai Always Walks Away is the perfect example of how to do a one heroine visual novel. The title character, Chihiro Himikai, is a very nice but surprisingly deep person. The visual novel itself doesn't get too deep into her character, but we get to know enough about her to where it feels like it was straight out of a moe route. My best girl on Cross Channel was Toko, though for kinda unique reasons. She wouldn't win any most likable personality awards or anything, but she just had a few twists to her that made her much more interesting than the other characters. My best girl on Deerdrops was Riho. I prefer tsunderes who are like this, who go on full savage bitch mode instead of the insecure, bipolar, tough girls we usually get. Rio's savage honesty felt oddly refreshing to me, and her route was great. My best girl from Doki Doki Literature Club was easily Sayori. The Doki Doki Literature Club plus side stories helped the other three characters more likable in my eyes, but I quite like Sayori even in the original. She's a hyper childhood friend character, but a lot deeper than expected, and Doki Doki Literature Club Plus handled this aspect of her even better. My best girl from Draco Riot was Elena. The other girls had potential, but were either boring or ruined by Ubisoft humor. However, Elena is a good example of how to do a tease pervert character well, with a decent story and character development in her route. My best girl in Ever 17 was Sarah. Ever 17 is a visual novel you'd read more for the mystery, though I suppose there is some decent character development for most of the characters compared to other similar visual novels in the same genre. Sarah is the closest I'll get to my quirky girl preferences, and she was pretty funny. My best girl in Fate Stay Night was Sakura. While I did like the other two main heroines as well, part of why she's up this high is because Heaven's Feel is easily my favorite route. We get to learn a lot about what she goes and went through, and her relationship with Shiro was really good to me. My best girl in Full Metal Damon Muramasa was Kanai. I was not expecting the mature woman to also be the hilarious weirdo. She was easily the funniest character in the visual novel, while still having cool and deep moments fitting of Muramasa. My best girl in Futuraba was Rina. Me protagonists have this kind of weird spaz degenerate humor, and Rina is one of the few characters who not only goes along with it, but can be pretty fun and savage in her own way. She also has some surprising depth in her route that I wish the visual novel expanded more on. My best girl in the Gersaya series was Kazuki. The main 5 girls were funny or interesting, and some of the others were fine, but I'm all for intellectual girls actually done well. There were some immoral things Kazuki did that I wasn't a big fan of, but otherwise she was a pretty fun and likable character. My best girl in Jisenjo no Mao was Tsubaki. I know Haru is the fan favorite, but I thought Tsubaki's development in her chapter and route was the most interesting of all the main heroines. And I guess she is the most waifu-y of all of them. My best girl in Harem Kingdom was Hikari. A lot of great factors just lined up. She's college age, has an amusing awkward childhood friend romance with the main character, she's tomboyish and kinda degenerate, blunt and hilarious, and has a surprisingly good backstory considering the setting. My best girl in Hoshizora no Memoria was Asuho. She's not exactly the deepest character ever, even in her own visual novel, but she gets by for me because her dare is just that good. I just can't think of many characters who do the very obviously affectionate characters like her, while still feeling like a real character and not being really obnoxious. My best girl in If My Heart Had Wings was Kanako. Kanako is a tease, lazy-ish character, though she has some pretty interesting moments of her being empathetic in a few routes. Her lazing around in her sleepwear was kind of funny, and she did have a decent enough route and flight diary, though I wish it were a bit longer. My best girl in If You Love Me Then Say So was Ayame easily. I loved her right from the first scene when she gets introduced to fast food apple pies. She just had a lot of funny, innocent, misunderstanding dialogue, getting really into the games and food she likes, and just generally being a very sweet girl. Input Output is a complex plot mystery thriller visual novel that doesn't exactly focus on the girls. That said, Ishtar was my favorite, just being a calm yet charismatic leader to her group. It's just a shame she didn't get to do all that much considering the scope of the visual novel. My best girl in Karawa Shoujo is Emi. I think all 5 girls embody the even crippled girls are still people theme well, but I like the way Emi's route does it best. She specifically subverts her issue of not having her legs by taking part of track and turns it into a plus, and her drama was relatively normal. Kikoku-ga is a dark Nitro Plus visual novel, and as you may expect, it's more about the psychological edge. Ruili is the star girl, who's definitely the victim of Nitro Plus style tragedy, though there's a lot more to her than meets the eye, which made her a lot more interesting to me than expected. My best girl in Kira Kira was Kirari. Sadly, I wasn't too much of a fan of Kira Kira visual novel as a whole, but thankfully Kirari's personality was pretty good, and she easily had the best routes. My best girl in Koikari Love for Hire was actually the China Kona twins. I thought they were consistently the most hilarious characters, best representing Asa Project's stupid humor style. If I had to pick between the two, I actually prefer Chinatsu because she was a great way to make a tsundere actually funny, but Konatsu's weirdo-ness was pretty good too. My best girl in Koisuru Natsu no Last Resort was Riho. It's been a while since I've read the visual novel, but I remember Riho having a kind of fun, teasy personality and I think a kind of interesting rich girl drama in her route. My best girl in the Majikoi series was Miyako. I liked her right from the beginning, where her first scene has her wake up Yamato with her usually daily romantic confession to him. Her perverted jokes and bad ends were always hilarious, and actually really liked her development in her route. My best girl in Making Lovers was Mashiro. Smee somehow knew every personality trait I wanted in a visual novel heroine. She's quirky, unique, fairly dairy, a gamer, hilarious, and actually adult age. She's my current #1 visual novel girl of all time, period. My best girl in Marshmallow All the Way Home was Sasa. She probably had my overall favorite character development between common route and her heroine route. Her shyness leading to her weird self-deprecation jokes were kinda annoying at first, but they became pretty funny. My best girl in Meteor World Actor was Chiffon. She's an interesting case of being a subdued type of eccentric. She's the most action-oriented visual novel in the heroine, but also the most chill, and just has a really unique way of approaching her issue of being poor and interacting with other people. My best girl in Musicus was Mikazuki. It's interesting that they made the weirdo girl the title heroine. She was funny sometimes, but I actually thought they mostly focused on her serious, deep parts to herself and her unique thought process. Some of her actions changing depending on the branch of route you take was pretty interesting too. My best girl in the Muv-luv series is Sumika. Sumika does have some annoying moments, but ultimately she does the childhood friend trope mostly well for me, and she has a role an alternative that led to my personal favorite visual novel moment of all time. My best girl in My Fair Princess was Ayame. Ayame is a kind of basic dairy senpai, which I'm cool with. The way her family ties to her route is heartfelt if a bit cheesy. Her liking the main character because he kinda resembled her brother was kinda weird, but other than that, the romance was nice enough. My best girl in the Nekopara series is Cinnamon. I'm not really a fan of the animal girl trope in weeb media like anime, but at least Cinnamon has some personality traits I like her being a nice friendly person and having some funny, lewd jokes. My best girl in Never 7 is Haruka. Never 7 was actually the most character-oriented visual novel in the Infinity series, and Haruka's route definitely improved because of that. Her route and character development revolved around her insecurities, which I thought were interesting and developed pretty well. My best girl in Ninki Seiyu was Itsumi. I liked all 3 main heroines, but Itsumi had the most underdog story, so her development felt the most cathartic by the end. While she was a kinda serious person, she was also pretty nice and understanding. Some of her traits were kinda relatable. My best girl in Princess Evangel was Konomi. I mostly liked how hilarious she was. Her innocence and tendency to speak what's on her mind led her to say the darndest things. Her romance and W happiness was meh, but so was everyone else's. My best girl in Remember 11 was Kokoro. It was pretty nice to have a female protagonist in a non-otomege for once. She is likable, though given the nature of this story, it focused more on the mystery thriller aspects which were good compared to character development. My best girl in Rewrite was Kotori. For the longest time, she was my number one girl in visual novels, period. She's one of the few heroines where I first saw her design I was like, yeah, I'll definitely like her. She's quirky and hilarious, but also nice and pretty deep. My best girl in Riddle Joker was Mayu. In fact, she was the only girl I liked enough to even do her route. She's a bit older than the other heroines, which led to her being more mature, but also the most openly dare and slightly quirky. Her route ended up having a good mix of plot and romance. My best girl in Route Double was Mashiro. I do have a childhood friend bias, but there are some nice reveals that made her more than just a tomboy's childhood friend. She just also had a generally friendly and fun personality too. My best girl in Sabata the Witch is Wakana. She's the perfect side route female bro character with solid romance potential. She's very direct and blunt, but also a surprisingly caring person. The brave man joke in her route was one of my favorite jokes in visual novels ever. My best girl in Sankaku Renai was Sheena. Sheena in a way felt like the parody of the uncommon female eroge fan in the best way. Her crazy knowledge to have 100 plus visual novel recommendations and liking the main character just because he was plain was funny as hell. She's just one of the most consistent, hilarious characters in visual novels I can think of. My best girl in Senran Banka is Lena. Making fun of foreigner weeaboos isn't anything new, but I thought the way they portrayed Lena was consistently hilarious. She had so much English and Japanese misunderstandings. That said, I really liked her role in her route, being a very empathetic person. My best girl in Char no Kuni was Sachi. While she doesn't necessarily have the most waifu-y personality traits, I thought she easily had my favorite chapter in the whole visual novel. Her laziness and being forced to do her job and the monastery were so intense and done so well. My best girl in Shinigami no Kiss was Honoka. She was admittedly just a plain dare character and likely had the least interesting story, but personality-wise, she was easily the most likable, especially compared to the Lolly Reaper, and especially compared to the super bitchy stepsister. My best girl in the Skyfall of Stars or Miyazora series was Hinami. In the original, she didn't appear that much, but she was funny and weird. But I loved her appearances in Fine Days and Interstellar Focus, the fan discs. She was still hilariously weird as always, but she developed a very sweet side that I quite liked. My best girl in Symphonic Rain was Forney. I just really like her intense devotion to helping the main character out, despite just being a little fairy no one else can see besides him. There was also some very memorable scenes and twists later on that pushed her up really high for me. My best girl in Sujiro-san no Junai Road was Ayumi easily. This is the only girl on this list that does not have a route. Despite the main selling point being the delinquent girls, Ayumi's motherly personality and mildly quirky design enticed me to her very quickly. Her eventually being the ultimate wing woman to Ai made me like her even more. My best girl in Tsukihime is Kohaku. To me, she by far has the most fun personality, by far the best character development, and by far the best route and ending in the visual novel. I'm really curious to see if the remake will actually change her route much. My best girl in Umineko is Erika, easily. Most Umineko characters seem like they were written to be purposefully unlikable people, but Erika is written to be so unlikely bitchy that she became very entertaining and hilarious to watch. It helps that she mixed in English a lot, especially her frequent use of good duh. My best girl in Under One Wing is Kazusa. I'm not exactly the biggest fan of tsunderes, but she's easily one of the most reasonable I've seen, admitting when accidental pervert scenes are her fault. She had some pretty decent depth and character development in her route, which helped. My best girl in Wanko to Kuraso is Risa, which is funny since this is supposed to be a visual novel all about dog girls. She was a human character, and I'll never forget the funny scene she was caught with all her porn and sex toys. But outside of that, she was just a nice, friendly girl who was very compatible with the main character. My best girl in X-Blaze was S. I only checked out this series since S was put into Blaze Blue Central Fiction and Cross Tag Battle. Sadly, S was one of the few characters I even liked in the X-Blaze series. She was a kinda typical robotic girl who gained emotions as the story went on, but it was done pretty well in the context of this being a visual novel. And You and Me and Her, A Love Story, or Totono, my best girl was Aoi. She definitely checks off all the weirdo, quirky checkmarks I like in a heroine. She does have some interesting depth about her character, but sadly it leads to some of the parts of Totono that pissed me off the most in any visual novel. But otherwise, she was pretty likable. Finally, my best girl in Yume Miru Kusuri was Ayaka. Her route was all about saving her from being intensely bullied. Her ending was a little over the top, but it was so cathartic and hilarious that I didn't care. Otherwise, her personality was fine, but likely subdued due to the issues she was going through. And there you have it, all my favorite girls in just about every visual novel I've read. Do you have any thoughts on the girls I chose for this video? Were your girls different from the ones I chose in the visual novel? And if so, which one was it? Feel free to leave a comment below in the video with your opinions.